Did you know the very first scene ever filmed for Carrie was almost cut because the director thought it was too strange? That risky choice became one of the most talked about opening moments in horror history. Carrie, released in 1976, isn't just a scary movie, it's a story about a girl who just wanted to be seen. Behind that story is a world full of strange, surprising secrets. Let's dive into 20 weird and amazing facts about Carrie. Number 20. The book nobody wanted. Before Carrie became a movie, it was a short, painful, deeply personal novel by a young Stephen King. But King didn't even want the world to read it. He thought it was bad, too dark, too strange, too focused on a world he didn't fully understand. Teenage girls. So he threw it in the trash, crumpling the pages into a garbage bin. His wife, Tabitha King, found those pages, read them quietly, and told him the story was good, that the girls felt real, and told him to keep going. King pulled the pages back out and finished it. Doubleday published it in 1974, and it sold over 1 million paperback copies in its first year. A story that almost vanished became the start of one of the great careers in American literature, all because a wife believed in something her husband nearly destroyed. What looked like garbage turned out to be gold. Number 19. Brian De Palma almost didn't get the job. When the studio began adapting King's novel, De Palma wasn't the obvious pick. He was a young filmmaker in 1976, known for being creative and bold, but also a little unpredictable, and the studio was nervous. What convinced them was passion. De Palma read the novel and connected instantly with its themes of outsiders, cruelty, and explosive emotion. He described Carrie not as a horror story, but a tragedy. Carrie wasn't a monster. She was a victim who ran out of choices. That idea, that the scariest thing in the film was loneliness rather than blood or telekinesis, sold the studio. De Palma proved every doubt wrong. His camera work, slow motion, and emotional precision made Carrie far more powerful than a simple scary movie. What started as uncertainty became one of the finest horror films ever made. Number 18. Sissy Spacek was not the first choice. The studio imagined someone more traditionally pretty and polished for Carrie White, and many actresses auditioned with more name recognition. But Spacek did something unexpected. She showed up deliberately plain, no makeup, hair hanging loosely, walking in as if she truly were Carrie, uncertain, quietly burning inside. De Palma later said the decision was made the moment she entered the room. Something in her eyes was heartbreaking and frightening at once. That combination of sadness and fire was exactly what Carrie needed to be. Spacek delivered one of the most stunning performances in horror history, earning an Academy Award nomination. Not bad for a girl who wasn't even first on the list. Number 17. Piper Laurie thought she was making a comedy. Laurie played Margaret White, Carrie's terrifying, abusive, deeply religious mother, one of the most chilling performances in horror. But she genuinely believed the script was a dark comedy, that the over-the-top religious speeches and wild emotional intensity were meant to be funny. She played Margaret with total seriousness while privately thinking the character was absurd. When she saw the finished film, she was stunned. Audiences weren't laughing, they were terrified. The qualities she thought were comedic had become deeply disturbing on screen. Her performance earned an Oscar nomination too, making Carrie only the second horror film ever to receive acting nominations. She played it as comedy. The world received it as nightmare, and somehow both things made the performance perfect. Number 16. The famous shower scene and its controversial opening. Carrie opens in a high school locker room shower, filmed in dreamy slow motion before turning brutal when Carrie gets her first period and is mocked by the other girls. Studio executives were uncomfortable before the film even released. Some thought it too graphic, others unnecessary. De Palma argued the scene was essential. It established Carrie's total isolation and humiliation, even in her most private moments, and showed the other girls' cruelty in a way that told the audience something dark was coming. De Palma fought for it and won. That opening told the audience the film would be emotional before it was scary. What looked inappropriate to executives became the moral foundation of the entire film. Number 14. Sissy Spacek chose to sleep in her costume. In the days before filming the prom scenes, Spacek asked to keep her costume and makeup, including the fake blood, and wore it home, sleeping in it. She wanted to know what it felt like to exist inside that image longer than just a scene. The stickiness, the weight, the strange way people looked at her covered in what appeared to be blood. She wanted her body to remember the feeling so the exhaustion and humiliation on camera wouldn't be performed. They would simply be there. That physical commitment bled quite literally into every frame. What you see on screen isn't acting pretending to be discomfort. It's discomfort that was never fully washed away. Number 13. The split-screen finale was inspired by opera. The climactic prom sequence uses split screen, multiple images showing different things happening at once, creating a feeling of chaos and the world coming apart. De Palma didn't invent the technique, but his inspiration was opera, not other films. He spoke about being moved by how opera stages multiple emotional events simultaneously, music, voices, staging, all overlapping and intensifying each other. He wanted the prom to feel like an opera, overwhelming the viewer not through one clear event, but through the collision of many at once. The result was a sequence unlike anything horror audiences had seen: tragedy, fury, and fire all playing out together, each feeding the others. What looked like a technical trick was a deeply artistic choice that changed how filmmakers show chaos on screen. Number 11. Stephen King hated the first cut. King's reaction to an early cut of the film was not positive. He felt it was too slow in places, too focused on visual style over emotional core, and worried that important novel moments, like the town's reaction to the disaster and the framing documents, had been cut entirely. He also felt Carrie wasn't given enough quiet moments before the ending's explosion. King and De Palma had a respectful but honest disagreement. De Palma held his vision, believing the film worked as cinema even where it departed from the book. The studio agreed, and the film released as intended. Audiences and critics responded with enormous enthusiasm, and King himself came to acknowledge that De Palma had made something real and powerful, even if different from what he'd imagined. Two visions of the same story. The argument between them made both better. Number 10. The town of Chamberlain was never real. Chamberlain, Maine, has become one of the most recognizable settings in King's universe. Fans imagine it as a specific, small, cold New England town. But Chamberlain doesn't exist. King invented it, and the film wasn't even shot in Maine. Production was based around Los Angeles, using local locations dressed to feel like a different decade and climate. The film's cold, hopeless atmosphere came entirely from performance, lighting, and storytelling, not geography. The town audiences believe in so deeply was built from nothing. It only exists on screen. Something that feels painfully real but was never there. Maybe that's the most Carrie thing of all. Number 8. Amy Irving was almost the lead. Irving, who played Sue Snell, the girl who feels guilty over Carrie's treatment and sends her boyfriend Tommy to take her to prom, almost played Carrie herself. De Palma was drawn to her and had her screen test for the lead too. She was compelling and talented, but when the tests were compared, Spacek's Carrie had something Irving's didn't: complete believability in Carrie's isolation. Spacek disappeared into the character. Irving seemed to be playing it. A subtle difference, but in a film this intimate, it was everything. Irving was cast as Sue instead, delivering a haunted performance. She was also the hand that emerges from the grave in the final scene, tying her character's guilt to Carrie's memory. Two girls, one role, and the choice between them shaped everything that followed. Number 7. The prom queen vote was rigged on and off screen. In the story, cruel students rigged the prom queen vote so Carrie wins, setting her up to be humiliated with the blood. During production, the crew held their own mock vote to establish the prom's social dynamics, and almost no one spontaneously voted for Spacek's Carrie. According to De Palma, that was valuable. It showed the instinct to overlook Carrie was entirely natural, and the world of the film reflected the real world in that moment. That made the tragedy more honest. Not just actors playing cruelty, but a system already quietly doing what systems do to people who don't fit. Number 6. John Travolta almost didn't return for reshoots. Travolta played Billy Nolan, the boyfriend who actually rigs the bucket and pulls the rope. By the time reshoots were needed, Saturday Night Fever was in production, and his schedule was tightening fast. there was real concern he might not be available. The production worked around him, sometimes shooting his scenes in just a few compressed hours. Travolta committed and delivered, and shortly after Carrie released, Saturday Night Fever made him one of the biggest stars in the world. What could have been a scheduling disaster became a small miracle of coordination. Number 5. The score was almost entirely rewritten. Pino Donagio's score for Carrie is one of the most emotionally effective of the 1970s, but it was almost completely different. De Palma originally worked with another composer whose drafts were darker and more conventionally horror-driven, heavy and oppressive throughout. De Palma felt the music fought against the emotional story he wanted to tell. He wanted the audience to feel sadness and tenderness for Carrie, not just fear. So he brought in Donagio, who created a score that's in places almost heartbreakingly beautiful. The main theme sounds more like a lullaby than horror music. It was a radical choice that made the violence feel more upsetting, not less, because the beauty of the music made what happened to Carrie feel even more wrong. Number 4. The film was shot in just 30 days. Given the practical effects, large cast, and elaborate prom sequence, it's surprising Carrie was shot in roughly 30 days. Extremely tight even for 1976 Hollywood. De Palma was known for efficiency, storyboarding almost every scene, so he knew exactly what he needed once the camera rolled. The cast was equally prepared. Spacek and Laurie knew their characters deeply, meaning fewer takes were needed. Some sequences that might have taken another director a week were shot in a single day. The entire prom climax, with its rigging, fire, slow motion, and split screen, was shot in intense, focused bursts. What looked like an enormous production was executed with the speed of something much smaller. Number 3. The film made Stephen King famous. King had published Carrie as a novel in 1974, and it sold well, but it was De Palma's 1976 film that turned him into a cultural phenomenon. People who'd never read the book rushed to find it. Publishers who'd passed on King before began paying attention. Studios looked at his other stories with new eyes. Salem's Lot was already underway, and The Shining was in progress. The Carrie film created a wave of interest that lifted all of it at once. Without the film, King's career might have grown slowly and quietly. With it, the growth was explosive. Carrie didn't just adapt a book. It launched an empire, and every horror story King has told since traces back to a crumpled manuscript his wife pulled from the trash. Number 2. Sissy Spacek was nominated for an Oscar, the first time for a horror actress. At the 1977 Academy Awards, something almost unprecedented happened. An actress primarily known for a horror film was nominated for Best Actress. Spacek was recognized not as a genre actress, but simply as a great actress delivering a great performance. Piper Laurie was nominated too, for Best Supporting Actress. 2 horror performances, 2 nominations. The Academy was acknowledging what horror fans always knew: great acting is great acting, regardless of genre. The nomination sent Hollywood a message that horror done with craft and intention could be art, and the conversation about horror in serious cinema would never be quite the same. Number 1. The ending Stephen King wrote was even darker. The film's ending is shocking. The prom destroyed, the town devastated, Carrie stabbed and killing her mother in self-defense before the house collapses on them both, ending with the hand from the grave. But the novel's ending is darker still. In the book, Carrie's destruction doesn't stop at the prom and her house. She tears through the whole town, destroying gas stations, toppling power lines, setting off explosions, leaving Chamberlain in ruins with dozens more dead. The novel frames this through documents and survivor testimonies describing a kind of local apocalypse. De Palma chose to concentrate the horror more tightly, keeping it personal rather than expanding into a disaster movie, a choice many argue made the film more emotionally powerful. The narrower the destruction, the deeper the grief. Carrie's pain feels less like a disaster and more like a tragedy, which is exactly what it always was. Bonus fact: the mirror scene that broke everything and fixed everything. Early in the film, before the prom, before the blood, Carrie stands alone in front of a mirror in an old dress, hair loose, the light dim. She looks at herself and slowly begins practicing a smile, not because she's happy, but because she's trying to learn how, teaching herself to be someone she's never been allowed to be. It's a small, quiet scene with no special effect or jump scare, and De Palma almost cut it, feeling it slowed the pacing toward the prom. His editor convinced him to keep it, telling him it was the reason the rest of the film would hurt. Without seeing Carrie try to smile, the audience wouldn't understand what was being destroyed when the blood fell. De Palma kept it, and in preview screenings, chatting audiences fell silent during it. Some cried. No blood, no horror, just a girl in a mirror trying to smile. That was the real monster in the film. Not Carrie's power, but the world that made her afraid to use it. Carrie isn't really a horror movie. It's a story about what happens when a person is never seen, never heard, and never given a single moment of kindness, about what cruelty does, not just to its victims, but to everyone around them. Brian De Palma, Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and everyone who made this film in 1976 created something that goes far beyond scares. They created something true, and truth, even when painful, is the most powerful thing a story can offer. The next time you watch Carrie, or if it's your first time, remember all of this. Remember the trash can that almost swallowed a masterpiece. Remember the wife who believed. Remember the actress who slept covered in red syrup, so her discomfort would be real. Remember the director who borrowed from opera to show chaos, and the composer who wrote a lullaby for a girl who is never safe enough to rest. Every movie hides a truth, and Carrie's truth is this: kindness is not weakness. It is the only thing powerful enough to stop the fire.